really looking forward to these 2 days of being with all of you, just talking over the last evening and this morning, and appreciating the variety of different situations and problems and challenges that all of us face in using video has been fascinating for me, and I'm really looking forward to the next few days of that. Let's just have a quick look at what I'm going to cover. It's a long session, so in fact it's not going to be just me talking, you'd die of boredom. I'm going to break it at several points and we'll actually do some interactive work. I think that video is one of those areas where the people sitting in this room can actually help to shape the future, and we need to use a session like this to do that, rather than just to listen to one person who has one thing to say. This is what we're going to try and cover today. Just to make sure that we're all aware of a couple of the background things, these are the sectors that we're going to cover. Make sure we're all sure on the jargon: higher education, training, technical and vocational, ELT and CPD are all in the video space. And I talk quite a lot about ITN Edu. I'll just give you background on that. ITN is a brand you won't know, but it is the owner of all the video archive rights in a commercial model for not only the UK commercial broadcasters, but also NBC, Japanese television. It handles Reuters, Bloomberg, a large amount of video content. This is an organization which a couple of years ago made the strategic decision to add education distribution of that archive to its normal broadcast distribution, and I have partnered them through my company Digital Learning Associates for the last 2 years in turning millions of hours of broadcast material into an education-facing asset. So that's being done by ITN Edu, which is a B2B facing brand, but we're working now with many of the first-tier leading publishers on the next generation of video education products. And although I can't name those clients by name, that would be commercially confidential, they're all the very big players. You can probably imagine who they might be. And one thing I'll be able to do in this session is show you some of the products and approaches that will be being launched and coming on stream in around 2019, which are now going into production that I'm working on. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to observe is I think there's an absolute divide where the black line is here between, on the one hand, the professional and vocational employability kind of education. So it might be around medicine or some of the simple verticals, car engineering, whatever it is, where video is accepted both as an instruction mechanism and even as an assessment mechanism for giving certification. We're at a point where there is no way in many of the professional verticals you would actually step back from using education. It's the obvious thing to do. So just to take an example, several thousand people qualify a year as fitness trainers. It's all video. There isn't another way of doing it. There may be a couple of face-to-face teacher-instructed sessions, but those people have moved into a video space and they submit their final assessment piece as a video. That's a technology that really works for those kind of learners, and these are actually quite big businesses as well, and growing, particularly as people start to pick up their educational qualifications later in life or to repurpose themselves in their careers. So we see above the line there, above my black line, a very enthusiastic welcome for video by both the publishers and the users. Below it, however, in the academic and K-12 sector, it's really not there yet. There's a lot of resistance in many markets, not in all, but I was working recently with the Australian New South Wales syllabus, and it was really interesting to observe that in a new curriculum on geography, a fantastically visual subject with a lot of great video material, there isn't a video at any point in the instruction, in the assessment, in the certification. It's really interesting to see how far different those two worlds are. In the middle is ELT, which I think is at the moment going through this transition, and one of the reasons I'm concentrating on that both in my work and in what we talk about today is I think it is one of the areas where you have obviously a professional and vocational orientation is quite a strong part of that industry and that segment, and it is indeed crossing this bridge from being a predominantly text, maybe some kind of interactives sector, to becoming one which I think in the next few years we will see video really taking over as the predominant and default normal experience for the ELT learner. That's my view, but I could be wrong. We'll see. Okay, a couple of just very basic pieces of technical background. One of the things we all have to ask when we're moving into video is, are there organizations where the students are capable of receiving it? Unfortunately, we don't have any unified data on European institutions, but I'm just going to pick the American data up here for you. I guess we all have a view on to the extent to which the European institutions will be lagging behind the North American ones. So if we look at the number of megabits available per student in the state sector, it's quite interesting, I think, to see how the different points at which that has been measured, and people have actually tried to say, well, what actually is present versus what do we really need to deliver the kind of education that we might imagine delivering. We see this, an order of magnitude change every 3 years that it's looked at in terms of the actual capacity installed. And I think that's quite interesting. If we're looking, technology often moves in these kind of very big leaps. And if we're seeing orders of magnitude, then we can expect by 2021 to be seeing something like 10 megabits per second per student in a school in the US. That's a transformation in terms of video, because it does allow live streaming at high definition to about half of the students at any one point in the average school setup. Interestingly enough, the perspective of how much is required has also evolved, but not at quite the same rate. If we believe the ConnectEd promise of President Obama, we should be getting in the US to a situation where pretty much every school will have adequate bandwidth for putting a high-definition video in front of every student on a sort of basis that maybe half of the students at one time will be doing it, doing work on video. So looks like the infrastructure is evolving, certainly in the US, and with a different time lag in different markets. Let's assume something similar will be going on in the European markets. Let's also look at, again, sorry, this is US data, but that's just the way, unfortunately, there isn't a way I can find this in Europe. Let's look at what the investment plans for technology are for, this is the independent sector now, which obviously tends to be more aggressive on investment than the public sector. So again, we may have to offset these figures a little bit. These are the categories where over a third of schools are planning to make an investment in their investment horizon was 24 months. So these are spendings that are going to be happening in 24 months in over a third of schools. So you can see that not all of those necessarily support video, but many of them would enable video or enable better experiences around video in the classroom. But it's by no means clear that it's just a video direction for investment. There's clearly a lot of interest in other things like adaptive and so forth. Another thing that came out in this report, the ESIS report, a survey of purchasing intentions, was that around blended learning, there are the clearest intentions being expressed. Now, blended learning is interesting. When you see the word blended learning, it's really code for video. That does mean that there's going to be a lot of video content. It's a very high likelihood that that will be substantially video related. So they asked school directors where were the areas where they expected to find most enthusiasm, both in terms of stakeholders in the school community and subjects, and it was very clear that the students were most in favour of it, and the science teachers and the science curriculum. So that was where we would expect to see the most energy going into video in the blended format, and where the cold water was being poured was in humanities and by governors and trustees of schools who are tending to be reticent either for investment reasons or they didn't get the pedagogy. So I think that helps us to understand where, as publishers, when we're moving towards video adoption, we know where our friends are and we know what the subjects are that are likely to get people excited. We're also looking at a much wider trend in the use of rich media in the classroom, and I think it's worth understanding or asking ourselves, where does video fit into that? So all of these kind of technologies are getting adoption, and we expect teachers to come up with them as suggestions, certainly in leading schools. I'm particularly interested to see what you think about whether video is part of this or not. I believe that it's a different story. I think that these are the kind of rich media trends that are probably on a different, they present a different set of problems and opportunities, but let's just talk about them briefly. Obviously, you know how we can do live annotation, and that's an important piece of the puzzle for assessment as well. It really helps in formative assessment, and we're seeing quite a big adoption of that. Gaming, we haven't yet seen how Minecraft education really sort of sells. It's just starting to sell now. But it being embedded potentially in some of the Microsoft school platforms means that I think we could be seeing an adoption of that kind of visual experience as part of either a blended or a classroom aspect of education at very large scale, with the muscle of Microsoft behind it now. The MOOC space is interesting, so I follow that quite closely, and obviously that looks primarily like a higher education play at the moment. But there's a very interesting transitional product which has just come out with FutureLearn and Leeds University, which is, I think, showing the way forward. So of course in the US systems it will be now normal for a 16 to 18-year-old to do at least one of their courses at home remotely by distance. And in the European market, Leeds has given us an interesting insight into how this could work, whereby they're offering students in geography the possibility to do the Geography 101 course over the summer at home, free. So they already come with 30 credits on arrival. Now that's a fundamentally video-led course, partly because of the nature of the subject. Next year, Leeds is going to start offering those people a reduction on their course fees if they do that. So you're beginning to see the relationship between video as a delivery mechanism through a blended learning MOOC like that, and the ability to offer a real tangible benefit to the consumer of education. You know, it's very painful paying 30,000 UK pounds to get your child educated. If you can take a couple of £1,000 off that bill, you're going to be interested. So these are drivers that I think we'll be seeing more and more of. We're even seeing, again, that's a US, the Malone Schools Network is a US player, but we're seeing these distance colleges actually set up at scale with significant venture capital behind them, offering networked solutions across multiple sites, all of which have a lot of video in them. And again, I can see money and energy and capital and technology coming in behind scaled video-centered solutions in some markets, certainly. So does video belong to this story? Or is it a different one? Well, I don't have the answer, but that's, I think, one of the important questions for us all. The generation we're looking at is Generation Z. These are people sort of born from the year 2000 onwards. And let's have a quick look at the behavioral expectations, the data about how they are and what they expect to do, because these, we're in an interesting, I think, dichotomy around video where within the classroom space, some of the things that are most important to Generation Z are not happening, and they're going at home to do them. So let's try and understand that a little bit. Obviously, obsessed with the device, the normal place to do anything is on a screen. They like to have 7 screens running at once. There's no cognitive load problem for them on that. It's very important that they feel, I'm looking at myself here. It's quite a sort of narcissistic generation. They want to feel that I've met my friend on screen rather than some weirdo who's not like me. And when that comes down to content, it does mean that they want the experience to feel fun. It doesn't need to feel like something other than I would choose to do anyway. So that dichotomy that we've often had about, this is work at school, but this is play at home, is beginning to be smudged and sort of mixed up a little bit. And video is a very important potential part of that because it's potentially both the education and the entertainment medium. Another thing that the data shows about this cohort is that the so-called transversal skills are very important to them. They're being told this by their teachers, and it's part of the employment rhetoric as well, which is, I don't just need you to know about transistors, I need you to be able to work in a team, take leadership, think critically, solve problems, communicate. So that skills agenda is very much present in the mind of the Generation Z effect. And some publishers are really taking a bet on this. So McGraw-Hill, with its its new play around the science of learning, I think is really saying that this generation is going to be asking all the time of its educational experience, how can I use my time well? How can you, school, publisher, teacher, how can you promise me that my time is being used well? Because I'm going to take a serious approach to that. I really want to know that this is well used. They're offering these neuroscientifically validated pedagogies. I don't know if it's just smoke and mirrors and marketing or whether it's really true. But I think it's an interesting way to observe how publishers in the education space are beginning to look at the demands of Generation Z. And Generation Z perceives that technology massively improves their experience. They may be right, they may be wrong, but somehow we're going to have to engage with that. And McGraw-Hill has got one take on that. I also think that something has changed very significantly around the rate of adoption of technologies that are sort of out there. So if you look at these guys, and you'll have seen them, people walking around doing this sort of stuff all summer long, not only do we see these extraordinary peaks, although that is tailing off a little bit obviously, but you're seeing educators very quickly come in and respond to that. So it may be that the way that we adopt all technologies, including video, is actually sort of stepping up a gear, and we're seeing speed. So on the Pokemon Go course, for example, a group of educators has spontaneously self-organized what looks like a kind of informal MOOC on education in alternate reality. And there's a 16-week course that's just been put together, boom, like that, within a week, by everybody in the world who was interested in it, and they're studying it and developing it and producing syllabuses around how you use this particular app for a whole range of subjects in the classroom. We're not here to judge the pedagogy of it or the educational quality, but it's fascinating to me how quick that happened. That course was up and running, and people were starting to deploy Pokemon Go in a broad range of disciplines within a matter of weeks once they saw the size of the effect. So I think that could be evidence of a change in our environment. It's just become that much faster at reacting. So I'm not here to say that video is definitely the thing of the future and you have to go into it, because I don't know. We've been at this moment many times before, and I had some interesting conversations yesterday with some of the delegates, and Christiane and I had an argument about this, about, my God, we've been waiting for video adoption to come next month for the last 20 years. Is it really going to happen? But I think it's a bet for all of us. I look at it a lot, and my bet is that yes, it is coming, and within the next few years we're going to be seeing some really significant adoptions. And some of the colleagues I've been talking to this morning are clearly at the stage where they've passed over into a world where that is the future expectation. I think it would be quite good now to just work interactively as a group here. I'd really be interested in trying to capture, and maybe we can break up into smaller groups for this, how we see the timeline going for education publishing working in video. And it would be really interesting if we could just all report from our own actual sense, not our hopes and ambitions or dreams, but our actual sense of where in our contexts we expect various events to happen on this timeline. I just think that's a great opportunity for us to capture that intelligence here today. So we know, I'll give you two facts at the beginning where we are on that. There is a lot of investment in the ELT sector to produce a video-led generation of products that will hit the book fairs probably next year, sorry. And we know that both through Pokemon Go and through Minecraft, we have AR and massive multiplayer games moving strongly into the education space. Those are both sort of screen video related experience. At the very other end, I've been working with a laboratory that's doing disembodied agents for education. These are very interesting things. These are the face of a teacher scanned onto a digital maquette and programmed with software behind it to actually deliver a personalized interaction over a screen with your teacher appearing to speak to you. And they're able to give you coaching and mentoring on some of the more pastoral aspect of your education. So you're effectively speaking to a robot, but it looks like your teacher. And it relates to you like your teacher, and it smiles and it has gestures, and it's a human being, but it's a way of scaling the personal and reducing the cost of the personal interaction with the teacher. We may feel it's horrible, but I'm working with some wonderful people who've actually done it, and for a lot of people, actually, that may be okay. So that's when they think that's going to come into the scaled use.